They're the only weapons in the world, frankly, that can do that. That can actually intercept the Russian ballistic missiles as they come onto and explode in Ukraine. It's very difficult to do that, and these Patriots can. And so for the Ukrainians to be able to manufacture them themselves is a big deal.
President Trump has offered Ukraine licenses to produce Patriot interceptor missiles. He made the remarks at the NATO summit earlier.
One of the things I think we're going to be talking about today, a little birdie told me this, about the fact that we'll give them the right to make Patriots. We'll show them how to do it. It's very complex, actually, but you'll figure out the complexity quickly. We're going to give a license to you to make Patriots. That's pretty cool, right?
Larry?
This way you can't complain that we're not giving them enough. I say, make them yourself.
Well, technology could make a big difference to Ukraine's air defences at a time that Russia has stepped up its ballistic missile attacks on Kyiv. Let's speak to William B. Taylor, former US ambassador to Ukraine. He was also chargé d'affaires for Ukraine. Good evening to you, William.
Good evening, Carole.
Thanks so much for joining us. How significant do you think it's going to be for Ukraine to get the right to create these Patriot interceptor missiles?
Carole, I think it's very significant. It's going to take a while. Let's be clear. It's going to take a while for everything to come into place. For the licenses, for the manufacturing to be put in place, the building the factories. That's going to take some time. But the message is the important thing today. The message is that Donald Trump, the United States, is very strongly supporting Ukraine. He joined consensus, the whole consensus at the whole NATO summit in support of Ukraine. So I think this is a demonstration definite demonstration of that support.
And he did, President Trump, meet President Zelensky today. It seems to have been a pretty warm, a pretty cordial meeting, even if at one stage when he was talking to the media, President Trump did accidentally call President Zelensky Putin by mistake. But leaving that aside, just after such a long period of time when the US has been trying to reduce the amount of support it's giving to Ukraine, this does seem to be quite a significant change of heart.
I think you're right. I think it is a change of heart. I think while President Trump was distracted from Ukraine, he was looking at other things like Iran for the last couple of months. And during that time, Ukraine grabbed the initiative, took the initiative, put the Russians on their back foot. The Ukrainians are actually winning, Carole, as you've been reporting on the battlefield, and they're striking deep into Russia, which, by the way, Trump also endorsed today, these deep strikes into Russia, which earlier he had not. So Ukraine in the past couple of months has emerged as a winner, and Donald Trump likes to back winners. So I think that's one of the reasons that you see this change today.
So it's interesting that you say that you think Ukraine is winning. I mean, it hasn't actually regained significant amounts of territory along that eastern front. But through those strikes that you mentioned there, in particular the strikes deep into Russian territory on its oil installations and so on, it does seem to be inflicting significant damage and economic damage on Russia.
You're absolutely right. The Russian economy, other than the military economy, is in terrible shape, and the Russians know it. The strikes that you mentioned against oil facilities strike the ability for Russians and the Russian economy to support this war. If they can't export oil, they can't support the war. And these deep strikes also, Carole, go after the manufacturing of these missiles that the Russians are lobbing at Ukrainian civilians every day, every night. And so the Ukrainians are going after those manufacturing facilities of those missiles. So they're taking it to the Russians.
Yeah, and we have seen, though, just as Russia is somewhat on the back foot, it stepped up these ballistic missile attacks on Kyiv and other cities. I mean, the significance of the Patriots that we were talking about at the beginning is these are missiles that are an air defence system, aren't they? They actually intercept incoming missiles.
They are. And they're the only weapons in the world, frankly, that can do that. That can actually intercept the Russian ballistic missiles as they come onto and explode in Ukraine. It's very difficult to do that, and these Patriots can. And so for the Ukrainians to be able to manufacture them themselves is a big deal. There are other systems. The Italians and the French have systems that are similar, not quite as sophisticated, not quite as effective, but there are others around there. And by the way, the Ukrainians are working on their own version of the Patriots. But these Patriot missiles do intercept incoming ballistic missiles from Russia.
President Trump, again today, was talking up the prospects of a deal to end the war. He says he wants to make a deal to end the war with Ukraine. He talked about the possibility of President Zelensky and President Putin actually meeting. But, I mean, is there actually anything happening to try to bring this about? Because it does seem as though President Trump's efforts have been so focused on the US-Iran conflict. There's certainly been no sign of any attempts to try to get any kind of negotiations underway.
The only attempts that we've seen over the past couple of months have come from Zelensky. And he's proposed to Putin that they get together, not in Moscow, by the way, someplace else, and not in Kyiv, but somewhere. And so that's been the only real motion, only really activity. Because you're right. Apparently, the United States only has two negotiators, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, and they, as you say, have been focused on Iran. So they haven't done anything on the Russia-Ukraine one. And it's not at all clear that there's going to be a big negotiated end to this. There could be a ceasefire. Putin will be forced, I think, to come to a ceasefire when he realizes that he's losing on the battlefield. He's losing economically. He's losing politically. That's when he'll look for a way to look for a ceasefire.
But there's been no indication so far, has there, from President Putin that despite all those setbacks, despite the fact that he's had to admit to fuel crises, to economic difficulties and so on, there's absolutely no indication yet that he's prepared to try to seek peace, to try to bring this war to an end.
You're absolutely right. No indication. And that's what has to happen. There needs to be pressure on Putin to bring him to that conclusion. Now, maybe President Trump can do that. Maybe these continued strikes from the Ukrainians on oil facilities and on other military targets, maybe that can do it. Maybe the people around Putin will recognize the big problems that they've got. But what has to happen is Putin has to realize he can't win. And in order to do that, as you say, it needs to be more pressure. We haven't done it yet, but more pressure can do it.
And just finally, is there a risk, though, that President Putin could still resort to, rather than suing for peace, suing for even more aggressive attacks, in particular, of course, as has always been the fear, a tactical nuclear weapon?
I think there's a very, very little chance of that. He would be banished from world history. His main supporter, China, has told him very clearly, don't even think about it. And there's no military value. There's no political gain for him on this thing. I think the chances of that, Carole, are very, very low.
Well, that is something at least. William B. Taylor, former US ambassador to Ukraine, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me, Carole.